Okay, Jeff, just from my, this is Leo. Can you give me an idea exactly, is this a subcommittee or a committee meeting? Ally probably told me, I just don't recall it.
Yep. So this is a subcommittee. This is the coordination and collaboration subcommittee for the cybersecurity task force that was stood up by the governor with Executive Order 2125. So
Okay,
really looking at how do we approach cybersecurity as a whole of state, and including all the appropriate stakeholders, and one of the key stakeholders obviously being critical infrastructure. So, so hence that is why we reached out to you. Jay had throwing Jay under the bus on that, had recommended to reach out to you, as well as obviously, you guys work very closely with the regulated utilities on various matters, but definitely how you interact and engage with them, as a vehicle for us to possibly communicate with them, coordinate, if we have some sort of major cyber incident disruption or we're seeing things, et cetera. So really just kind of as a subcommittee wanted to hear how you interact with the regulated utilities and what that relationship is like, and if there's a vehicle or willingness for cyber to engage in that space as well. So,
well, I can speak, I think for the most part for the utilities side of the KCC, but there's other parts of the KCC out there as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn my video on, although I'm over here. But, the other part of the KCC is both conservation, which is all the oil and gas division, right? They have multiple contacts throughout the operators, throughout the oil and gas division. Trucking for transportation division also would have many people that they regulate. On the utility side, we have 3 natural gas utilities we actually regulate, and 2 electric utilities, and 2 or 3 water utilities. So there are a lot more utilities out there on the electric and even on the gas side that we don't regulate, but we have contact with them. On the gas side, particularly, we have contact because of pipeline safety regulations. So it's not utility regulation, like we can't set their rates, we can't say that, how they're serving their customers. We do look at them from the safety side of pipeline safety, which ties back in a little bit to the cyber side as well. So let me talk about the gas first. That's because I'm most familiar with that. I've been doing it the longest. We have 58 municipal utilities that we regulate on gas for pipeline safety. We have, of course, the 3 big utilities, Atmos, Black Hills, and KGS. By the way, if you look at customers served with natural gas, the 3 big guys serve 90% of the customers. All the munis together only serve about 36,000 customers. So 36,000 are spread across 58 utilities, and they're spread across Midwest Energy, which is a co-op gas company. And they have about 40,000 customers. I guess they're not in that 36. 36 is just the munis. There'd be another 40,000 that would be Midwest Energy. It's like a muni, but it's a much more sophisticated muni. So in that regard, those are the ones we look at. They're also on the electric side. There's I don't know this number exactly. There's like 118. So Pat says 118 municipal electric utilities, which we do not have regulatory authority or safety authority over, really. But they're out there. They have a pretty good organization in the state with Kansas Municipal Utilities through KMU. And if you haven't contacted them, I would recommend you do that for gas and electric, but it's particularly for gas, or for electric rather. So that's one way of getting there. For the co-op electrics, there's how many co-ops do you know out there?
Low 20s.
So 20 some odd electric co-ops across the country. Large footprints there, though, in surface area, not very many customers really. Kansas Electric Cooperatives, another nonprofit organization that's an association, deals with them. And there's Kansas Electric Power Cooperatives, which is KEPCO, they're a transmission company that basically serves the co-ops. The co-ops are members of KEPCO. And then, of course, the co-ops have their own membership, being the end-use customers they serve. So that's sort of how it lays out for the electric and the gas side. Again, electric is going to be mostly Evergy and Empire. They're the two public utilities we regulate. Together they probably serve, well, I don't even know. I don't know the customer count there.
Evergy's around 1 million.
Yeah, Evergy's about 1 million.
Kansas.
And in Kansas customers, right?
Yeah, some thousand.
And of course, Empire just operates in the southeast corner of the state. They have about 10,000 customers. Right. So those two companies still have the vast majority of Kansas customers in their operations. So, of course, with the public utilities, we have daily contact of some kind or another with those guys all the time. We're always talking with them. We don't have any set specific requirements that they call us if they have some kind of a cyber issue. They do, in fact, notify us, though, anytime they have anything that's significant. I'm going to say it. They get to define that, but I mean, it can be pretty small to be significant. Someone hits a pole and they're calling us to let us know that, hey, there's been an injury because someone hit a pole. So we get calls frequently when things happen on their system. And certainly when we did have something here this last winter, there was some sort of an event that sort of a denial of service attempt. I mean, they get a lot of attempts probably daily. There was one that they called us about and let us know that this was happening, that they had got it figured out and they were taking care of it. And we talked a bit about it as well. So it's informal, but that's generally how we work it. With the gas companies, you know, from the pipeline safety side, we get, anytime we lose 50 customers or more, they're calling us to let us know what's going on with their customer base. So it's the same kind of informal arrangement we have. It's not a requirement, but it's an informal arrangement we have with the utilities that they notify us. Does that help?
Yeah, that does. And again, kind of open the floor to just kind of the conversation with everyone. And do you guys provide them out information on things you're seeing happen? Is it kind of the two-way informal communication structure?
It is, and we do that through emails. I mean, especially, you know, because of the fact on the gas side, again, we're tied into PHMSA, which is the pipeline safety version of DOT, you know, Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. So it's federal, but we get notices from PHMSA all the time about happenings, and I send those out as emails back to everybody.
Leo, one of the reasons that I suggested you might chat with us a little bit was I hearkened back to that meeting that we had in Manhattan where the one gentleman from the municipal utility, and I'm pretty sure it was a pipeline safety type seminar that we were conducting, but he told us that he didn't have any worries because he wasn't connected to the internet. And if you recall, I asked him, well, do you get email? And he said, well, sure, I get email. So obviously he is connected to the internet, and he didn't really understand the weakest link that we were trying to talk about at the time. So do you still conduct those seminars, realizing that COVID has probably put a halt to some of this, but do you still do those seminars? Do you plan to do them? Is cyber awareness part of what you have done or intend to do in the future?
Well, Jay, we just finished one last week. And in fact, we had a presenter from CISA on that made the pitch for everybody to, you know, take advantage of their service and let them review their systems for them, and also discussed, all the various things that can happen to your system, how easy it is for someone to hack into your system, basically. So we were able to present that to the people that are at the seminar. But you got to understand our demographics when we have those seminars are pretty much frontline workers from the municipals. I mean, they have some management capabilities or responsibilities, I should say, but they're not the city councils or the city clerks. Those are the types that are more typically going to be involved from the municipals, at least from my perspective. Those are the ones that are more involved with the computer systems, especially the city clerks. I mean, we get guys that are, they're good plumbers and they're very dedicated to their job of protecting the safety of the gas system. Paperwork's a secondary job they have, and so it's not the person that really watches that very well. It would probably be more in the realm of city clerks. Now, because we've spoken at it before, there is an association of city clerks or county clerks as well in Kansas. I don't recall even the name of how the name is. You probably have to Google it, but you could probably find it. They also, like us with the pipeline safety, have some sort of annual meeting where they get together to discuss what's there, and be a great group for the small operators, because they have the water systems too, right? To be involved with. I speak frequently with the Rural Water Association, Kansas Rural Water Association, because they overlap. They take care of a lot of munis on the water side, so we have some common operators. We have common interests around damage prevention of utilities from excavation. So often I talk with the Rural Water Association. They always have articles in their publications about cybersecurity, which I think it's a quarterly magazine that comes out. So it's a big issue to them as well. So the munis are probably getting this type of coverage, not just from, KCC pipeline seminar, which is pretty small participation compared to the rest of the muni world out there. There's 600 and some odd municipals in Kansas. Rural Water probably reaches more of them than we do, by the way, as far as utility side of things. City Clerks is another organization I think would be a really good one for you guys to try to collaborate with. And also, I know when the guy from CISA was talking about the services they offer, I mean, that's a great group that could take advantage of that, I think.
Do you know who it was from CISA that presented?
Well, we sent you an email because we wanted to make sure he was legitimate. So we're doing our own check. It was Jeff Jalista, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, he's the one.
I don't remember getting your email. I'm sorry.
I think Pat sent you one. I had him send it to you yesterday when we got it, just to check and see if he was.
It might have been Bill Glenn.
Oh, it might have been Bill you sent it to? Okay.
No.
But anyway, we were just kind of following up to see who he was and what kind of service he had. And as he was talking, by the way, he put up his email address. It was a Zoom meeting. We had him on as a kind of a Zoom call, and he put up his email address, and we kept asking questions and talking, and he was getting emails from the crowd that were there. So
good.
At least a few people were interested in what he had to say.
Well, I think that's probably a good suggestion, Jeff, that we talk to the city clerks. I hadn't thought about that, but it might be good to see what they are doing in terms of, since we're talking about collaboration, what are they doing about educating their constituency regarding cyber and cyber hygiene and all that sort of thing. And I had not thought about them. And then the rural water folks, that would probably be another one that we ought to find out what they're doing so that we can maybe include in our report something about working with them across the entire state.
Now, there's one more industry we haven't talked about, and we don't have a lot of response on. I don't. Now, there's other guys in the KCC that have some, and that's the telecom industry. And maybe Jay's even more familiar with that than I would be. I don't know their associations, if they have, if the rural telecoms or the even the larger ones, or even the cable TV guys for that matter. All of that is probably going to be able, should be considered as well.
And there's the State Independent Telephone Association, which was, of course, the Kaplingers were the founders and executive director and so forth. But I don't know. I think Mark is the only Kaplinger that's still alive. Didn't a junior pass away a couple of years ago?
I hear the name, so I recognize it, but I don't know anything about them at all.
Now, Jeff, the entity may still be out there, but after I left the commission, I kind of lost track of what was going on with them. But that might be another group. Whether or not they'll share much with us, I don't know. But and there's also the Kansas Telecommunications Industry Association, and I think some of the cable folks are a part of that, as well as some of the telcos. There's overlap, but the membership is not identical. I don't know whether KTIA is still in existence either. I've just kind of lost track with being out of the commission.
And I should have found out more about that before this meeting, but I'll check with our telecom guy here and see what he can give me on that.
Sandy Reeves. Yeah.
Or Sandy Reams, yeah.
Yeah, Sandy would probably do.
I mean, and those are really kind of good point. That's one thing we keep finding. There's so many of these avenues to investigate. And again, maybe I guess the question is long-term or short-term, how do we continue building this? Because we're not going to be able to evaluate. And again, is kind of partnering with KCC and their various avenues to reach out, or definitely include KCC in those conversations, just because that general group awareness type. I mean, I think that some of the relationships KCC has already that we might not have, and we start trying to build on our own, that does make it a little easier.
It probably is there with the telecom. It'd probably be a good place to start. And I just got to get you some information there. I didn't reach out to our telecom guy, and I just don't have much knowledge on them at all. But we'll find out. I think you're right. It sounds natural to me that we would have some contact still with the telecom industry, and know someone to talk to there that can put us in touch, at least with the association they would have, or some kind of group they would have. So I'll do that and get back to you guys on it, find out who that would be. One thing that I want to bring up, because Jay sort of mentioned it, and that is response back to the KCC, or, we reach out to these guys with various things. We've done a survey that NARIC put together, trying to get kind of a feel for everybody, how you're doing. A few utilities answered us. The ones that we have authority over typically would answer us. A few didn't want to give us anything in writing. They would talk to us about it. And telecom was didn't even really want to talk to us about it on some of the response type stuff. So I'm not saying it's good or bad. I mean, they have their reasons, and some of those reasons are probably legitimate. They're trying to keep things as secure as possible. And the more people you bring into that community, the more chance you have of having something get outside that you don't want out. So I look at more as an avenue. It's a one-way street. We can give them information. You can provide them with these opportunities and stress to them that it's an important thing for them to do, and then hope they do it. But being able to evaluate, did they do it? That's not a very easy task.
I guess one of the questions I would have is maybe from an appetite and bandwidth kind of discussion. Is that something the KCC still has some more bandwidth or appetite to engage in and outreach to those organizations? Or is that something that
we can send things to them, and I don't have a problem doing that. I mean, that's simply an email, right? Pretty much, and then trying to track who got the emails, at least that we sent them to them. The appetite of trying to find out who's responded and why they haven't responded and what's their reasons and are they valid reasons, that's going to be a job. And I don't think we have the staff to do that, to tell you the truth.
And it was more on just peer communication question, not necessarily on, engaging in follow-up and things like that. As at least from my purview, as we again look at making recommendations, finding places where relationships already exist and kind of leveraging into those instead of reinventing the wheels and sharing information. Or for example, if we wanted to do kind of a road show or have somebody do a road show and bring people like Jeff from DHS and CISA and to kind of have those conversations, if you're the appropriate avenue, to communicate that stuff out, or if we need to kind of go directly to the association. I as we had talked earlier in our group, it's just building those relationships sometimes is harder. And so leveraging things that are already there, it's already coming from a trusted source. It's not kind of like, who is this guy who's come to talk to us?
Right, and and because we had that relationship with both Jay and with Bill, we reached out to them to say, okay, I got this guy's name, this Jeff Janista. I had no idea who he was, or if he's legitimate. So we just check out and see if he's there or not. And they would want to have the same, at least that much comfort level before they share a lot of things with you.
So what I hear you saying, Leo, is it might be good to have us funnel some information over to the KCC, which it can then push out and not necessarily have any follow-up, but if it comes from the KCC, they have a little bit more comfort level, that a little higher comfort level that the information is legitimate.
I think that's a fair way to put it. I mean, we certainly have, we have contact lists, in our emergency support function 12 at KDEM, Pat's got all kinds of contacts for across the industry that we talk with when we have a tornado or the ice storm last year. How are you guys doing? What's going on? Getting updates and that type of thing. So we have contacts, and we can certainly send this information out to them as well.
Sorry, one kind of, you might not know the answer to this, but is there any requirement, that the utilities that you regulate have any sort of association with, for example, their ISAC community, which is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center? So obviously there's one for state and government type entities, but there's a financial sector. I believe there's one for elections, and I don't assume there's one for the electric sector and things like that.
There's definitely one for energy, electric. There's one for downstream natural gas. I think there's one for upstream natural gas. I'm not sure about midstream, which would be the gas plants, but they all seem to have some type of ISAC set up for them, one type or another.
Is required to participate in those, or is that kind of all optional?
If they have transmission, electric transmission, which is the local electric transmission system, not the wires that you see around town, but it's going to be the bigger lines, that you would see. Those guys are required through the National Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC. NERC is kind of I don't know what you really call them. They're in a way they're quasi-governmental. They're an association of the companies, but they're under the authority of FERC, and they can actually enforce requirements. So they have a whole set of reliability requirements, and part of that is cybersecurity. What are those? I'm not trying to think of. There's an acronym they use for the cyber.
Yeah.
There's a whole set of things they have to fulfill under cybersecurity for the electric utilities. So they're very rigorous about it. They also get really nervous when we ask them for information, because they think that by bringing us into their circle of involvement, they could get themselves in trouble with NERC. So they will tell us about things and let us read things, but we never get to take anything away, no paper or anything like that. And that's fine with me, by the way. I think that's the right approach.
And I was just kind of looking at it too from kind of the information perspective, because obviously we don't want to they're getting cybersecurity information from there as well. And we obviously don't want to become more noise type thing. And so just trying to identify who like, for example,
it's been my experience. We can learn from them more than we can share with them. They actually usually know about things way before we do.
Yeah, and it's more of one of the issues we struggle with from my office, is sometimes agencies have already signed up to receive alerts that we're not aware of, and then so when we send out our alerts, we're essentially doing kind of the double tap on information. So they begin also, ignoring us because they're already getting something. But if we have something that's different, might get missed. And so just making sure we're not, creating that information noise type thing.
I think that's a good point. You can get to the point that and I get a lot of ISAC alerts in my emails all day long. You get to the point you don't read them. No, I'll be honest. I mean, I'll take a look at the headline. If it doesn't really strike my fancy, I'm just deleting them.
Yeah, and if we're sending multiple copies of it, it gets tuned out even quicker, and just being cognizant of that. So.
Leo, did you say that there was sort of a checklist for NERC for the electric transmission companies?
Standards.
NERC, there's a set of standards for NERC, for CI, I want to say CIBP, does that sound right? CIP standards under NERC.
Critical infrastructure.
Yeah, there's a whole series of those. The checklist we've used to our utilities before was a survey form developed by NARUC.
Right, I remember that.
And it's called something PET, I don't remember. CPET?
Yes.
It's an evaluation tool they came up with. That's what the ET stands for, remember that part. And, it's basically, we went through and just kind of read their answers and tried to summarize. Yeah, it looks like they got this one covered. Man, they may need some work on this one, to get an idea across the board how our utilities were doing. I say our utilities, I think there's like 4 that we hard there. But even those answers, responses to that NARUC survey, the telecom industry, right, was the one that was really concerned. They did not really want to show us answers because they thought it would pinpoint their weaknesses. And they didn't know how well we could keep that information secure. That was their biggest concern. So again, providing them information is great. Can they use it? Now I have a relative that works at Wamego Telecom, and he works in their IT side. They're very much aware of what goes on in the world of cybersecurity. So it's not like they ignore it, even the small guys.
Yeah, when I was at the commission and we brought in the Fusion Center, Wamego was extremely interested. But of course, that's 3, maybe even 4 years ago. So they clearly were excited about getting up to speed on whatever they could do for cybersecurity. And I would imagine that some of the other independents are doing the same thing. I'm pretty sure AT&T did not attend that meeting. I can't remember if you were in the meeting or not, but there were maybe 10 people, I suppose, in the meeting. So I think your point is correct, that there are some of the small telcos really are on top of their cyber security issues. Sort of changing subjects a little bit here. As you pointed out, the KCC regulates trucking and oil and gas. I'm not sure that I can think of how we would interface with oil and gas or the trucking industry, because most of those are small independent operators. But correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Oh, I don't know. I would say on the oil and gas, just from my involvement on the gas utility side, that you're correct. Most of there are small ones. There are some large ones. Merritt out in the Hugoton is a big company. So there are a few big ones as well. And probably I would say the same on trucking. There's probably a handful of trucking that are large. I mean, it'd probably, if you think about it, similar to what we're talking about with utilities, there's probably a few large trucking companies and then a lot of small ones, kind of like we are with gas and electric.
Now, I do know that regardless of size of the oil and gas operators, they have to now do a lot of things electronically. So they have to be connected. Well, I say I know that. I'm assuming it's still that way, and it's moved more that way since I left the commission, I would think. Have you been aware of any issues with the connectivity, other than just normal things that pop up, but any sort of major type concerns?
I have not been heard of anything that's been brought to my attention anyway. They're going to be like any other business, I think, when you really get down to it. Their cyber security interests are going to be typical small business operations. Not a lot, at least on the oil and gas business that I've been around with them, that could be considered at risk of controlling energy like a big pipeline would be. Big pipes, of course, have that TSA directive now, and they're all very much aware of that.
Yeah. So Jeff, I don't know that it would be terribly beneficial to bring in some oil and gas operators or even some truckers, but I guess we just need to be aware that there are just a lot of them out there. They do connect into the KCC, and of course the KCC connects into all of government, but I don't know how far down that list we really want or can go, for that matter.
And I think one of the big things that really this conversation is more of, there's a vehicle to at least get information out to them if necessary, more than anything, and KCC is probably that vehicle. Whether it's from my office, the Fusion Center, the Adjutant General and Homeland Security, things like that, or, we're hearing things, much kind of like what we're looking at with like the League of Municipalities and Association of Counties. It's kind of the starting point, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, because there's those trusted relationships already.
There's a myriad of associations in Kansas. It's amazing. The Propane Marketers Association of Kansas, PMAC, has all the propane companies all around the state. That's a great one to look at. What's the one for the retail stores?
It used to be the Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association of Kansas, but that name has just changed recently.
Okay.
But
there's a group that's a marketing group for all the gas stations. Basically, they supply retail gasoline, and we always call them when we're looking for supply issues. Hey, we're hearing you're short on diesel up in this area because of the farming going on. What's going on? So those type of organizations, at least on our sphere of energy, which really isn't regulated by us, but we still have contacts with them. They're a good group for you to reach out to as well, for PMAC and the group for the Petroleum Marketers group. I don't know what the new name is. We'll find it out.
So kind of a bigger question, because I just came from the disaster or the incident disruption response. So what kind of, to say there is a natural disaster in an area that knocks out power, things like that, what is the kind of the intersection with you guys when an event like that happens? And obviously if there's a declared state of emergency at the same time, they can't deliver power or gas or whatever it is there much of a relationship there from that perspective in a declared emergency? Or is it just kind of, they just notify you and they work with emergency management on that type of thing?
Yeah, we're like a communications liaison, if you want to think of it. If anything, that's what we would be. You know, we got Pat's usually down at the SEOC if something's going on. And he's just there to answer questions they may have that are related to energy that they need an answer for. He reaches out to contacts to find the information. We don't order anybody to do anything in that case. These guys are already got their emergency plans set up, and they're working with them. We just try to keep track of what's going on. We can get them resources if they need it, and that happens sometimes, but it's pretty rare.
Taking the notes for today, so.
Yeah, let's see, it's up 12.
Right.
We respond to Katie.
Yeah, the KCC and the emergency response plan, the KCC's got ESF 12, and then there's a couple other ones we're into.
Right, for oil, it's ESF 10, and transportation's ESF 1.
So KCC has involvement in those three. And usually it's usually Pat that's down there
Yeah.
for all three of those, so.
And Kaden directs us to appear at the SEOC or work from our offices. During an event, we become a constant link with them for information. Most of that has to do with making sure information is
Right, that the information is available.
to KDM, the governor's office,
Right.
and vice versa, going back to utilities.
Kind of, and this is really kind of my last question is kind of along those lines. Was there any information shared between you and other states that might have been involved in the Colonial Pipeline incident? Just kind of lessons learned on that type thing, or is there kind of even that conversation between state corporation commissions or whatever their regulator is?
You know, we're under pipeline safety. I'm part of the National Association of Pipeline Safety Representatives. It's NAPSR. And they have a website. But yeah, we were sending emails back and forth all the time. PHMSA would send them to us. We're on kind of distribution lists through DOT and PHMSA. So we had information as soon as that happened. We were getting updates on it continually. And a lot of rumors.
Jay or John, Mike, if you have anything.
I think I've asked all my questions. Appreciate the guys coming on today, and hope they don't mind too much that I volunteered them, so to speak.
Well, not a problem. And I'll get you some contacts with the telecom side. I just didn't reach out to Brian yet on those.
John, you have anything?
No, I think you guys covered a lot of the ground. It sounds like there's some really interesting formal and informal ways by which information is shared and communicated. And I just continue to find it really interesting as we learn about more groups and more associations and like, how does that all fit into this broader picture? You know, it seems like there's no shortage of those. And one of the things that's starting to stand out to my mind, like, what are those central hubs by which we could share information to that maybe then can flow down to the next layer and so forth to make sure we can get our communications and stuff out there. And it feels like we learned a little bit about that today here with this discussion from Leo.
It sounds more and more, and I appreciate Jay bringing that up, because it sounds more and more like KCC is one of those integral partners in that information sharing spectrum. So.
Yeah, as I was listening, I was thinking more and more about how do we identify kind of those central hubs that maybe we can use as we think about the strategy going forward. And I agree. I think KCC seems like they fit right into that.
Well, again, appreciate your time.
Okay.
It's been valuable information. And like I said, I don't think we have anything else at the moment. But if
Very
we
good.
do come up with anything, we'll definitely send the questions over. And again, appreciate Jay recommending to bring you to the subcommittee, because I think we did learn a lot about kind of some of the things that exist out there and ways we can kind of expand that and the coordination collaboration pieces. So
Very good. Well, I've got another call I've got to jump on anyway,
Yep.
so it'd be a good time to end this. And if you got anything else, feel free to reach out to me.
excellent. Sounds good.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Leo.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was exciting. There's, I think we could have meetings into perpetuity, and we continue to learn some new and cool things as we go along the way. I know every one of these where we have folks come in, I always learn a bunch of new stuff. Pretty cool too to see like just how much some of the cyber messaging is occurring across the state in these different groups and these different pockets in different ways. I think that was a net positive for me so far as we've been talking with others. It's really cool to see that there is messaging going on, there is communication going on, there is collaboration going on. And then, just trying to figure out how do we leverage that at scale so that we can start sending out additional information, maybe for those folks that aren't getting certain types of information. And Jeff, I think you touched on it too, the challenge of trying to make sure that we're not duplicating the same messaging. Because I agree, I belong to several Isaacs, and sometimes in one day you may get like 5 versions of the same thing in 5 different emails or whatever. And I think that's challenging, because how do we make sure it's not just noise and it's actionable? Because I think that's one of the things that's a question mark in my head as we think about this too, is we want it to be timely, but we also want it to be actionable and relevant. And we want folks to say like, yeah, we get an email from whoever, and it's got the good stuff in it, and we want to pay attention to it. All right, I guess if we're ready, we can move into some of our open discussion. And we can just walk through some questions here that I have prepared. So maybe the first one, has anyone received any public feedback based upon the interim report?
I have not.
Okay.
I have actually received, I shared part of that with Jeff, talked to the USD 259. They're doing some similar things, I guess, with it because of an audit. So they want to engage. Also talked to Joe at Wichita State. He thought the response section looked good to him. He thought that was something that we could move forward with quickly. So that was the feedback that I had.
And one of the things I've noticed is we've gotten a few responses into the mailbox that was associated with it, but it looks like kind of some of the mainstream media circuit didn't really take place. So I don't know if we'll get some of the outside feedback beyond what we share as members with our stakeholders, et cetera. I am seeing though in the past couple days, it's starting to hit more of some of the other things like GovTech, et cetera. So we might see some more here in the next few weeks as well. And I think, let's see, I think one of some of the feedback, I think one of them happened to be a sales pitch type, et cetera. But
Were they trying to sell you a car warranty?
Yes. It is expired, so I need a new car warranty. So, and I think we'll start getting more. So, and again, I think, as I mentioned, I think we put something strong together, and I think we're definitely on the right path. It's just really kind of, as we look, what are kind of next steps, what are additional recommendations, or anything that are critical. So we kind of talked in the larger task force, sort of critical path type things, as we can continue to identify those. As crazy as we started talking earlier, just the number of associations and things we could possibly tap into just seems like it's a never-ending list. And again, I don't know if that's something we just kind of need to include in that might be there's just a critical aspect of any outreach is just continuing engaging those organizations, identifying and engaging as appropriate. And even finding out, if some of these organizations even want to engage, because some of them might say, we've already got this covered. We don't need somebody else stepping in as well. I don't know. So
I think that's an interesting thought, right? I mean, because we've talked about how do we get our message out there? How do we start letting people know? And I always like to think about, the folks that are interested are going to participate, right? But you can't participate if you don't know. And maybe it is something we should consider, that as we go forward in terms of this report, that we have some ongoing activity or effort around continuous outreach and just making that initial contact and sharing some and see who those interested folks are. Doesn't mean that we're going to go force anything upon people, but for those that are willing, those groups and organizations that are willing, maybe that's a way in which we can build some of this following, this community of engaged folks related to cyber matters. I don't know how that resonates with you all, but I think it's probably worthwhile. From my perspective, I think it would make sense, and it's probably worthwhile to continue having conversations. I think the challenge is, how do we do that in a way that continues to provide value on both sides of that conversation, right? We don't want people just having conversations for the sake of having conversations, right? We want to make sure that we're educating and we're exploring options, and we're understanding how we can get messaging out and how they can fit into the larger puzzle. I guess that would be one of my concerns, is like, how do we draft a recommendation around this in a way that's going to be meaningful for everyone that participates? I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, I think that makes perfect sense. And because some of the point is, they might already have a good process in place and a good focus around the cyber piece, that we don't necessarily have to become just that other layer of bureaucracy type thing for the sake of it. And I think that's important to clearly identify. Maybe the first is the step is the first rate, what's the, can't remember the saying, you got to raise the awareness first. You got to, what is it? What is our kind of, I say order of precedence, to your point, is raise awareness, identify the willing, and then communicate with the willing, while constantly also trying to continue to raise awareness for folks we've missed. Because it is a good point. If they think they already have it covered, they're not going to participate. And I don't know how much level of effort you continue to spend on that to try and change their mind, because while you're doing that, you're missing the other pieces.
I think that's right. We don't want to overkill it. And so I hadn't really thought, when I recommended that we talk to the KCC, I hadn't really thought about them being a conduit, but that probably is good, because that way the people will actually maybe take a look at it, go, ooh, this is from the KCC, maybe I ought to look at it. And they may say, wow, maybe I need to have this information coming directly to me. I guarantee you some of the associations out there are going to look at whatever we send out and go, yeah, just another something to not read. So if we can sort of get the association on our side, if you will, then it may give more credence to whatever it is that we're sending out. Just like them wanting to know whether CISA's representative was legitimate. They also contacted us about another person that contacted them out of the blue to help them. So they got a hold of me and said, is this person legitimate? Well, they are, but it at least gave them, they were at least aware of a resource where they could contact and say, okay, is this something I want to really do or not? So they could be that for us, as well as some of these other organizations that we've talked about could be that for us. But we don't want to just say, okay, dump it on the other organization. We still want to remain active and involved, I think.
So I think that's a good point to maybe a recommendation is any type of dividing communication subject lanes into either lanes or subjects or something, because definitely alerts and notifications versus just information to services versus, I mean, would that be something we want to focus on? Because again, you can tailor your message to each group depending on what they need. Obviously, like you said, the big associations, yeah, they're probably getting stuff from the ISACs already. They don't need another layer bombarding them with, hey, there's this vulnerability out there. But, oh, here's a state resource that's available to you at, whatever they might be more interested in. So, I mean, do we make sure messaging is just not, trying to think of the appropriate word of, just not dumping
blanket,
everything. Yeah, blanket messaging.
It's not blanket messaging. It's more tailored to what we think their need may be. I think that's a good point, because if all we do is send out blanket messages, I guarantee you the delete button will get hit more frequently than the open button will.
So, Jeff, do you have any other thoughts on that? Like, how do we contextualize that? Or is that something that we would just say we recommend having the messaging be contextualized, and that's something that could be thought about and solved later?
I think, yeah, the simple as a recommendation is as we develop outreach, we need to ensure that we're developing tailored messaging to, I'm trying to think of a way to put that out there. We determine the collaboration comunication needs of it, so we can tailor messaging. So we're focused on getting out the appropriate information. I'm trying to think of a good way to put that. So it's not just, we don't want to blanket them with everything, because again, it becomes a noise, it gets deleted. And each organization may have their specific needs, and I think when you sign up for like CISA's messaging, you can choose what's important to you. What do I want to receive from the CISA email blast?
So
I don't know if it's something kind of similar, but we still have to build those relationships first. So.
yeah, I think that's a good idea. That's where my mind was going. It's almost like a listserv, and you can choose which parts you want to be communicated with, right? Like beyond just, do I want a daily digest or not? I'm interested in getting threat alerts, or I'm interested in statewide cybersecurity matters or events. Like we had a recommendation about the need for like an annual conference. And so maybe there's an option there about you want to know about those types of things. Because that was where my mind was going as you were talking, is allowing each constituent group to self-identify and select what type of messaging is going to be most important to them. And then maybe as part of the conversations we have, we can try and refine or clarify by virtue of those conversations what type of messaging they would be most interested in, so that we could start to get a sense for, if we wanted to build that out in kind of that listserv style, what options we need to have available, right? Because we don't want to just have an option that no one cares about.
Well, and even to the extent is, do they even want to hear the messaging from us? Or is it, developing those communication avenues more important than actually the messaging itself? Because if we can also, to the extent, get some of those communication avenues almost self-reliant, and at least from the bigger picture, we may not have to do anything other than if we send to those, they know it's important because they're handling all the other stuff. I think that's probably the golden ticket in terms of solving, of identifying what's important and making it appropriate and meaningful when it's needed. That's the biggest challenge, obviously.
Gotcha. Well, I'm in favor of this as a recommendation, trying to figure out how do we contextualize the communications or have it tailored to be aligned with the respective individuals or groups' interests or needs. Mike, what are you thinking? Do you like this idea? Do you think it'd be helpful? I know you have some really interesting perspective on some of these things for the work you do.
Well, the only thing that, and I apologize because I'm kind of multitasking and doing some work and listening at the same time, but that most people, like, or at least me, I think a lot of people are swamped with information, and you kind of have that information overload already. I'd just be a little concerned about adding to that stack. Of course, they're going to be interested in that information when they need it, but I just don't know how beneficial it would be on a regular basis. I think Jay maybe said earlier that you'll get to the point where it'll just hit the delete key every time they get it. So I'm kind of torn. I mean, on one hand, I think it can be beneficial, but on the other hand, I'm just concerned that it would be too much.
So what if we adjusted the idea a little bit? So what about something like a community of practice, right? So if we could bring folks together, discuss best practices, where they can share what's working well, they have a trusted space by which to do that. They can take the bits and parts and pieces that make sense to them or make sense to their organization and go back and have something that they can meaningfully go deploy. So then it's maybe less about more email deluge and more about there's a trusted recurring spot or space or option for folks to be able to discuss those things. I don't know if that makes sense here, but I was just wondering, like, if the concern is about overload, and then I know I hear concerns from other folks talk about, well, I don't mind participating, but I want to be able to have something that I can take and go deploy back home, right? Like, I want to be able to move something forward meaningfully from that as well. So I don't know, just a different idea. I'm curious what you all are thinking about that.
Community practices are a good idea. And then at that point, it's also kind of like, and kind of going back to I'm going to go to what I think is valuable and pick those things, what I think are valuable. And as long as I'm given the options, I think that might be kind of the objective, is provide those opportunities out there and make sure folks are aware of them and let them choose. Or just, for example, do we constantly broadcast out, here's a bunch of free services that are provided from various mechanisms, whether it's DHS, CISA, and communicating things out like that? Or do we kind of flip it and have folks at least know, you can come ask us the question, we can get you the resources? Is it the kind of almost the inverse?
Well, and I was thinking maybe even more of like a workshop style or something where you can actively participate and actively have something at the end of it that you can go take back to your respective place. I'm not certain if I'm articulating this well today since it's a Friday, but I was really kind of thinking like something that's going to have higher level of engagement, and you're going to be able to have something useful at the end of it. Less about maybe here's some random things that might be useful, or here's some free services that may or may not fit for you. And I'm not trying to pick on your idea. I'm just saying, like, I guess where I was originally thinking was something more like roundtable or workshop or something like that, where when you leave, you can go take immediate action.
Yeah, I'd almost think if we had something that was like, I don't know, once a year or twice a year, almost like a one-day conference where folks could come in and you'd have everything from how do I do a tabletop exercise to how do I engage CISA? How do I think to John, to your point, right, have that opportunity for them to choose and make that virtual as well, so you can send it out across the state. I mean, to me, that seems like you get the information that you're interested in, and then you're able to take it back and digest it and implement it. And so to me, the kind of timing of doing something like that would be the question. Me personally, I think that would be something that would work really well. That's just me.
And I wonder if we couldn't use a mechanism like that to, I don't know what the right words are here, but I'm just thinking like if there's organizations that are doing really well with a particular piece of cyber, is that something that they could speak about and help others learn about? How can they take that same approach back in their organization from that conference or that event or whatever you're talking about? Really kind of trying to highlight success stories. I don't know if.
Yeah, I can tell you based on just some of the like half day or, well, was it a day? I can't remember. But we went, the red team here from McConnell would do just one day learning sessions. And we'd go and listen. And those were extremely valuable. I mean, they talk about how they social engineer other Department of Defense facilities, and they go into these practical discussions about some of the stuff that they do. And then it makes you think about, what vulnerabilities you have. That's kind of what that's kind of the direction that I'm thinking. We also had discussions with Friends University has a graduate program in cybersecurity. And we've done a couple things with them that were go and look at their, what they're doing and kind of the systems that they've set up and how they go about doing some of that work. And so I mean, I think there's, it kind of gets into that finding opportunities. It crosses over, Jeff. We kind of talked about, right, how a lot of these things cross over. It gets into the educational side of it as well. But I think there's an opportunity there just because then you're not spamming, spamming folks with stuff, but they could, to your point, John, they could actually come, pick the things that they're interested in and then have stuff that they could go back with. And wouldn't even have to be, all right, it doesn't have to be in person. So people in Western Kansas can, you know, can be engaged and involved as well.
And so maybe is the recommendation there kind of facilitating ongoing learning and awareness opportunities, you know, at a high level, and obviously refine it type thing. But this kind of goes back to the workshop workforce development. We actually started talking about kind of this, especially with incidents. You know, again, kind of the competing priorities of various stakeholders. Obviously, organizations want to get up and going as quickly as possible so they can continue providing services, but you have other partners such as law enforcement that also want to collect evidence so they can prosecute the case, and just kind of the awareness of how those interactions should work. And just I see it kind of as a lot of opportunity in that space, and just using that as one example. But your point, coordinating, facilitating in a larger engagement with the red team from the Guard, as part of that. And just, you know, there's a ton of things in that space that we just continue to, you know, provide those opportunities for folks.
Yeah, I kind of think, I mean, how cool would it be to virtually do a tabletop exercise that everyone could kind of sit in on and just get a sense of, okay, here's the scenario, and here's what you do to react to it. So not directed specifically towards, identified learning outcomes, but just more practical in nature in terms of, oh, yeah, so yeah, don't wipe your stuff because of the forensics, right? Or maybe we just lost power, and okay, so what do we do in that scenario? So I think there, I think it's an opportunity to put some real life learning options, and not just learning, but some understanding in terms of what's available. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what you have a lot of crossover there.
So it just kind of more broadly, I mean, would this be, I'm trying to think how to word this, probably one of the better ways to build rapport out with the communities is through a vehicle like this, and just, the blastogram type situation?
Me personally, I think it would be, just because it's more kind of not one-on-one, but it's right. It's not just an electronic document that they're getting. It's actually something that people understand. Hey, they've taken some time to structure this. They've organized it. They've provided this. I would hope maybe we could do it for free, but that we make this available to them. And to John's point, if they come home with something of value, then you've started to create those relationships.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be a good way to drive engagement, right? And I think ultimately that's what we want, or I think we want, as part of the output of this collaboration and communication, is engagement. We want engaged folks doing good stuff, continuing the conversation, and continuing to strengthen the state in terms of cybersecurity. And I think of a variety of ways this could go, in a variety of different ways. I think it's something, though, that if we're going to recommend it, it's got to have staying power, right? It can't just be something we did once or twice, and then it just kind of fell off the radar, right? Like, I think if this is going to work, it's going to have to be something that is ongoing, that does provide value, has takeaways that people can have, that drives that engagement. Because I think that's ultimately, it could become the hub to spawn additional collaboration and communication across the state. That could be a vehicle by which to really bring some of that together. And then your point, Jeff, earlier, is that, I think if this was done well and grew in that manner, it might be really interesting to see where it kind of takes on a life of its own, where maybe the independent groups across the state start to kind of shape that more into what they want or need. I also think that there's going to be some perennial topics that everyone is going to struggle with that needs to be covered on a periodic basis. And there's going to be some that it might be interesting just to have more guidance or insight on. It's like when you're trying to write policies for your own organization, like, are there best practices that you should follow, for example? Well, probably. That's something that you could take away, something that most people don't get excited about. No one says, oh, golly gee, I love writing policies.
And the more I think about, exactly what you're talking about, kind of the sting. So I know there are a couple of the recommendations about developing a position to kind of coordinate and liaison and things like that. Maybe we tie into, this be a potential job duty for that, is regularly developing these engagement sessions, whether it's 2 a month or 1 a month, and then kind of let it organically adjust itself. But I think kind of going back to the point is, I don't think anybody of our stakeholders wants to be in kind of that group of regurgitating things that other organizations are doing, such as MS Isaac or CISA when they send out their alerts. Maybe it's more of, if you want this stuff, here's how you go register for it. So we're not, again, kind of being the regurgitator and spinning duplicate cycles on things that are already being done. And so I do think what we're talking here is probably definitely the more pointed and appropriate approach.
I'm all in favor. I like the idea, if there's that person or that role that you're talking about, I think it makes sense if this could be added, right? I don't know what other duties might be assigned to that role. So, I want to be cognizant of not overloading the role. But if this is something that could be added, I think that makes a lot of sense. Because I just worry, I think it's a good idea, and it's just we're not going to see the net benefit from it if it only happens once or twice. I think it's got to be something that's ongoing. And I think that's how the value, the engagement, the collaboration, and the ongoing, net positives are going to continue from that.
I think, right now it's just what was kind of thrown out there is just kind of the person to coordinate, reach out, be the point of contact, be the face for communication. And obviously, and something like this is, we all have Teams licenses. Really, your only cost is the personnel and maybe some small travel costs, which usually don't equate to a whole much. But getting people involved and just presenting material, you're not hopefully ever in a point where you have to pay a vendor to teach per se. It's just somebody organizing, for example, reaching out to the 184th and saying, hey, can you have somebody from the red team talk about this? And then reaching out to maybe Wichita State or K-State or KU to talk about something. Whatever it may be, type thing. So again, I think appropriate use of resources, most definitely. So.
What's exciting, we got more recommendations. Or maybe I'm the
I
only one who
apologize, guys. I got to hop off for another our city council review, agenda review. So I apologize, but have a great day.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Hey, Mike.
So I know we're running a little thin on people today in the subcommittee, but I did want to take a few moments, if we're okay with pivoting now. I'd like to take a few moments and really think about, with our current recommendations that we have, do we need to do any type of prioritization on those? Do we need to adjust any order, or are there some that maybe need to happen before others? And so I just want to spend a few moments maybe thinking about that and discussing that in the event that we needed to adjust this a little bit based upon what we've learned from other speakers and even from the other meeting notes, and then also from our own discussion.
As I think, we're just talking about is maybe that. Let me go back down to kind of that that navigator liaison position might be a priority to help facilitate, because I think that position would help facilitate what we're talking about here. Annual cybersecurity conference, things like that would be a critical path on some of these things. Because if we don't, this just becomes additional duty for everybody else and probably falls to the wayside.
Jeff, what do you think about, that there is probably going to be a deputy Homeland Security advisor in the very near future. Should we maybe see if this could be something that could be added to that person's plate? I have no idea exactly what's going to be on that person's plate. But since we're thinking cybersecurity is an integral part of Homeland Security, would it be something that maybe we should talk to the TAG about?
I think that's definitely one avenue. I personally think this might be a full-time job in itself. Because we also had the recommendation of folks to help the localities with working through cybersecurity grants as well, things like that. So I think just the coordination piece might be a full-time job. I assume on the emergency management side, they've got one person assigned with coordinating all of their training efforts as well. So I don't know if it's kind of mirrored against that, or maybe somewhere a position within that space. I mean, it could really land in multiple areas.
Yeah, I became aware of the Homeland Security job coming up in the very near future, and just happened to pop into my mind that, well, this might, and again, I have no idea what the plan is for the position, so.
And I know CISA is supposed to have their person that is directly assigned to the state, and I can definitely see us being able to leverage into that some for various things and helping us, maybe if it is kind of a part-time duty, we help kind of leverage into that once we get that, if we could even explore that. But that might be an opportunity to help kind of from that perspective, and kind of divide up some of these. That's just a possibility.
But I do think having somebody to actually plan these things should be a priority for us, because otherwise, as you say, it's just going to fall through the cracks if we expect everybody to be in charge, so to speak.
Or you try and get it by committee, and then it just becomes, I thought he was taking care of it. So, and the others, I don't know, some of them like boilerplate contract language or catalog of state service. I don't think those are some critical path type things. I think they're definitely very important, but not something that if we don't get them accomplished, a bunch of other things fail or other recommendations can't be carried out.
I tend to agree with that. I think those can come at any time, right? They're things that will augment and enhance the other activities that are going on.
Agreed.
And some of those might be able to be kind of joined with what would appear to be some recommendations from a couple of the other subcommittees, right? So depending upon what priority order they put those on, just like the SCC, I guess that one's ours. Sorry.
These are all ours. You want me to go to specific ones?
I was thinking of CRN1. So there's a couple of these that look like they're fairly similar together. And so maybe as the priority order is set for those, some of ours can naturally fit into that activity. because it looks like we have 5 recommendations so far. And it looks like out of those 5, 3 of them are fairly closely related to what we're describing as a more priority item. If I'm thinking about this correctly, we have the Cyber Navigator, we have the Cybersecurity Conference, and then we have the individual or group to address cybersecurity grants. To me, those feel kind of similarly related in the sense that if we get a person or to lead that initiative, then they're going to be able to help with those. Is that what you were thinking, Jeff, as we were talking about this?
Well, and some, being kind of for example, if we don't create some sort of position like this, the recommendation on, we might be able to get away with trying to set up a single annual conference, kind of get a committee together and put something like that on. But if we definitely want kind of what we're thinking up of here, the continuous, community of practices, things like that, I see that as being a full-time job. So if we don't have a position like in one, that probably is not likely going to succeed. And so that's why I'm saying this is kind of might be a critical path type thing for some of those other ones. The grant piece, it could be this role or it could be somebody else. It's just one of the challenges we're hearing is for example, they just don't know what to spend the money on or what they can spend money on. For example, what we're talking about, when we heard from Oregon the other day is they use some grant funding for getting Albert sensors, which are, the IDSs provided by MS Isaac out in all the counties. That would be something that they could work with each of the regions to kind of work through. So how we execute on that might be a little bit difficult to say. On the long term, I do believe we had quite a few long term. Again, I think these are kind of, some of them kind of just critical ongoing. And maybe even not even just necessarily critical or long term. We just define it as ongoing, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, some of these felt like they were more part of that continued conversation that we were talking about. Right. So like the first one, partner with organizations. And there's a whole bunch of places that we mentioned to partner with. That to me feels more like that continued conversation. And it may eventually, maybe some of that would fold into this ongoing engagement activity that we're talking about.
Yeah. And at least notification through these organizations that then participate or have that one navigator, whoever go present to these organizations when they hold their annual or quarterly meetings, things like that. And that's why I said that position is really probably going to be a full-time job. So some of these, like I said, bleed kind of into the education piece and workforce development. I definitely think, as we talk, further expanding this one a little bit more to include, not just, the critical infrastructure pieces, but any licensing, for example, cybersecurity plays so heavily in the healthcare space that, what does that look like about them accepting cybersecurity as a optional CE for renewing those professional licensures? I think we can definitely expand that. I, again, don't know if that would be kind of a critical path type thing. That's probably a lower priority, but still something that could possibly have value. So how do we just kind of evaluate the rest of those?
So that's an interesting thought about, and maybe I'm not quite understanding part of what you're getting at there, but it's almost like CEs for various things that require licensure. Is that what you're mentioning? So like if you had your, I don't know which license to pick on, but maybe if you had your real estate license, do you need to have a CE or a certain amount of CEs that help educate you about cyber items? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, not necessarily make them, you have to take a cyber, but it would be an accepted, you have so many hours you have to meet, and, saying it's kind of like your optional elective. I'd take an hour of this, and that would be accepted as a valid CE hour.
Because I'm sorry, I'm a little tougher on them, Jeff, than you are. I think in this day and age, they ought to be mandated to take cyber training, because you look at the judicial system, for example. I'll pick on my profession. It's just everything, really, especially with COVID, has gone electronic, and if you don't know what you're doing, you can really be a problem for your law firm, for your agency, for the court system. And John, I think you mentioned real estate. Well, I've been involved in several real estate things over the past couple of years, and most of it was handled via DocuSign, for example. Well, if you don't understand why you're doing DocuSign, and you don't know how to do it, you get, I should say, from the realtor's side, then I think you have a bit of a problem. CPAs, for example, now I know CPAs in other states that do work for folks in this state. And again, they send everything electronically. If they don't understand why it should be encrypted, why it should be handled in a particular manner, and what the problems are if you don't do that, again, I'll get off my soapbox, but I'm not sure it should be elective. I think they ought to be required to understand what's going on in the world today. And now I really will step off my soapbox.
And that's one of the things is, how do we approach that? Obviously, I don't know if that's a legislative change or if that's just the boards voting something like that. And, I was just talking, some organizations, they're talking like nursing or any of those in the healthcare, they're required, HIPAA requires them to have some sort of general security awareness training already for their job. And with the CE, it would be kind of more of an augmenting of that knowledge, and basically saying, well, if you take one for your organization that might be required already, that doesn't count. This is more of a additional, skill set. And again, do we have two recommendations there? Some of it is there's probably more places where we need to see mandatory security awareness training. And then others, the space of continuing awareness beyond just what they might be taking in their job.
Yeah, there might be you might have to break it down to, okay, this type of suggestion probably does require legislation. This type maybe could be handled by the licensing authority. I hadn't really, excuse me, I hadn't really thought that far.
Well, it's an interesting thought too, because right at the end of the day, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just one team and one organization or one team in one agency. And so this concept resonates with me because I think there's a part here where bringing more education awareness, but also helping folks understand that we each have a role to play in this. It's not just that other person or that other group is going to take care of all of it magically for me. I think this is an important concept. The other part is the extent to which we broadly increase collaboration, communication, and ultimately awareness. That has a net impact on culture as well, right? So we have a more cyber-informed culture, we have a more cyber-informed workforce, we have more cyber-informed transactions and decisions that are being made. And you know, Jay, to your point about real estate, it's kind of scary if you're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and you've never really met people and you're just signing these random DocuSign things and you're hoping it's all good. Like, I mean, when we talk about assurance or trust in processes and systems and things, and sometimes one of the biggest purchases that folks are going to have, you know, to me, I think some of that could be scary, especially if you didn't fully understand what was going on, or if the professionals that are assigned to you to help you with it didn't really explain it well. And so I think this point resonates very clearly with me, because I think there's probably a couple things that we can tease out of this beyond just what we have here.
To have somebody sign a home title that isn't supposed to sign it.
Yeah,
Property.
I sold my mother's house in Pennsylvania. And obviously I'm here in Kansas. I did meet the realtor when I was in Pennsylvania, but then I came back here and everything was handled electronically. Never met the people that were buying it, never met the people that inspected it, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a young couple that bought the house. And you're right, it was a very significant, not that it was that fancy, but for a newlywed couple, I would think it was a very significant investment on their part. And all they ever saw from me and the realtor, as far as I know, was paperwork via the secure email system. And if the realtor had not been well-versed in how to do that and what needed to be done, the poor kids would have been up a creek. I won't mention which creek, but you know.
Yeah, I worry, you know, we're moving more and more transactions to electronic and digital, right? As more things become digital, less things become analog. You know, trust, confidence, assurance, whatever words we want to use here in those transactions, and the ability to understand what's going on and how do you validate that it is legitimate, I think is going to be very important. And we have a bunch of professional fields that very much help people navigate this. You know, so much like our navigator role that we're talking about, in a lot of ways, these licensed and certified professionals are kind of that local navigator to folks. And so I agree with you, Jay. I think I would take a little bit stronger position that, you know, maybe there should be a CE requirement around cyber. The alternative is to what Jeff was talking about. And I wonder if we couldn't explore that just a little bit more too, about maybe there is a CE option for some type of cyber component. And if I take that CE component as part of my licensure or certification, professional certification, you know, is it possible that that could get me dual credit, if you will, for maybe the annual training I'm required to go through at my home institution or agency, right? You know, instead of having to take like several instances of this. And I don't know if that's what you were talking about, Jeff, or if you're just talking more about it's an elective add-on that people could choose from, like if they were really eager and wanted to learn about cyber.
It was more of kind of the elected add-on that it would be accepted as a potential CE, just to start kind of getting that conversation going. You know, one of the things is it's tough, you know, and I think that's part of the challenge, is identifying some organizations probably it's required to take security awareness training based on whatever profession it is and organization they work for, but some maybe not so much. And to the point of, yeah, there really are two conversations here. That there's probably some spaces where it really needs to be kind of a mandated effort. But trying to be careful of these are just recommendations, and probably definitely further discussion that needs to happen with a lot more stakeholders. But then also kind of the space of, you know, picking on healthcare professionals. I know HIPAA still requires security awareness training to an extent, or at least privacy training. but giving them an opportunity to learn something different, have it count for something that they need to do through another requirement, and that's the CEU or continuing education hours. You might get more people continue just to, what are the subtle ways to continue to raise awareness and help building that kind of culture of security awareness, and giving some people some optional opportunities, I think, is an easy soft start into some of those conversations.
I completely agree. I appreciate the clarification there.
And so it's like, not necessarily giving them, I took it at office, so I can kind of foresee, I think it needs to be something, and there would be kind of somewhere, kind of what would be the approved, because some of the other things is, some organizations have very stringent requirements and don't want to have people, I took it over here, so that should work for here in my company. That might not work, and that might cause some issues as well.
Well, that's true. As Jeff knows, the AG's office requires annual training on cybersecurity. Well, and it's what OITS provides, but we also had training on the ethical considerations of using cyber for an attorney, and the one would not satisfy the requirements of the other, obviously. So that there is a difference in what the training is and whether or not it would qualify for a requirement for your license.
Now, and again, I don't know, and kind of on that, I don't know if there's continuing education requirements to maintain your license, your license with the bar within states, but I mean, is that something where people would be more interested to take if that would satisfy a continuing education requirement for that?
Sure. You have to have 12 hours every year to maintain your law license, 2 of which have to be ethics. So last year I provided a 1-hour class on the ethics of using electronic equipment and working electronically. So of course, from the AG standpoint, it was mandated training. So it wasn't exactly, you kind of like to take this. No, everybody had to take it, but it could be offered as an elective, and if it's not used for ethics, it could be used actually as a substantive hour. They're sort of interchangeable, but you do have to have specifically 2 hours of ethics every year.
And so I think that's kind of where the conversation kind of came down when talking with some of the other stakeholders, was kind of, if we can incentivize folks in some sort of fashion, they might be willing to kind of do some of it on their own, because there is an incentive to continue to learn more, and again, in turn, raise the general awareness. So yeah, I definitely say that's one to definitely think about, and how do we refine that one even further?
Maybe rather than mandating, maybe we could just say we strongly recommend that this be included in any training.
I agree. I think that's a good idea. So I'm just scanning through some of the other prepared questions I had for the meeting today, and it looks like that we're fairly awesome in the sense that we've already covered a few of them. Because we've talked about the recommendations. It seems like as part of our discussion, we've also talked about if there's additional context that we need to add to any of those recommendations. And I think we do have a little bit of context here that we've learned as we've been discussing those. We've talked about prioritizing the recommendations, and critical pathing a couple of those to ensure that those can get started and really start to see the benefit from those moving forward. And we talked a little bit too about how some of our recommendations tie into a few of the recommendations from some of the other subcommittees, and how those may join together when those start to take flight. And we discussed any feedback that we've received. I think that covers most of the questions I'd prepared to make sure that we could go through. And I know we're getting a little closer to the end of our time today. You know, are there other thoughts or questions or concerns that either Jeff or Jay, you all are having?
I don't have anything in particular, John.
I mean, I think we've got a lot of great places to start, and it's just kind of really the long term of actually beginning to execute on things. So, but again, that's not the problem we're solving.
So in terms of next steps, then I'm trying to remember, are we down to just one, or do we have 2 meetings of the subcommittee left?
We have 1 subcommittee meeting left, and then 1 full task force meeting left before we get to the 4-hour, wrap up. So one thing I do quickly want to note on that wrap up, we are entertaining possibility of doing it in person, or hybrid per se, and we're trying to find a very large room to do it in potentially. So just FYI for consideration.
And Jeff, is that meeting scheduled for December 1st? Is that when it got scheduled?
I believe so. Let me double check. I believe it was the Wednesday. Yes, December 1st.
Okay. Unfortunately, I am out of state at meetings with the Council of State Governments, and I might be able to dial in if it's a hybrid meeting, but I can't even guarantee that because I don't know what my schedule is at those meetings.
Understood. It'll be very much in the same fashion, so we'll at least still get stuff out, hopefully for folks to review. So if you have any feedback or input or suggestions, still email it to Allie as we're walking through it.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, anything we do will probably be hybrid, but we still kind of, folks greet and say thank you to folks in person type thing. But as we talked, Mike might not be able to make it to drive, 5-hour drive for, and then obviously Doug out in Garden City. That's a significant trip for him too. So we definitely have a hybrid option. So.
Okay, so thank you for the info on that. I guess as we look to the next meeting, our last and final meeting, are there any guests that we want to bring in for that discussion? I know there was a lot of groups and names mentioned towards the beginning of the discussion this morning. Are there any folks from there that we'd like to bring in, or maybe even other folks?
My suggestion is I think we've heard from quite a few. I think maybe just, again, looking back through these and kind of starting to compile what our new recommendations would be. Ideally, I'd like to see if we could have an output of what the suggested changes are of those recommendations to provide to the full task force, or at least so we can start compiling them to go through that last meeting, because I think we'll just have the last subcommittee meeting and then Thanksgiving break or Thanksgiving week, and then it's that full committee. So just like to at least see the recommendations make it over so we can compile those for everybody.
Well, and I think by next subcommittee meeting, we'll probably have some more feedback that we can review as well, which might guide and inform part of our kind of cleaning up and finalizing of some of the additional recommendations.
And I'll go back through some, kind of like what I did last time. If we don't have concrete things that we've typed up and put together, I'll still kind of go back and try and pull those together out of the conversations where we've identified something if we don't come up with a defined list ahead of time, but to try and get that put together as well. So.
Okay. Jay, are you thinking of anything else for next meeting?
No, I don't think so. I know Bill had said that he had been asked if he would present on the Fusion Center. I don't know what his availability will really be, because he won't be back at work yet. I know that since I'm doing his job. So I mean, and I'm not sure how much that would really add to what our discussion is anyway. But certainly, Jeff, if you thought you wanted him to present, you could talk to him and see. But I don't know that it would add a tremendous amount at this point.
I don't know if it would either. I mean, you guys did briefly talk to the full task force, so I think if we need to reference it back to any of that, we could go there. I'm trying to remember what the specific ask was for follow up on.
Yeah, I don't remember.
So I can look into that. I don't remember. You know, and as we talked in the incident disruption response, I mean, there's still a lot of things to iron out, big picture, and just kind of conversations. So for example, and this is kind of where this piece comes into play is, you know, it appears with emergency management to request help can only go through, for example, the county emergency managers to Department or Division of Emergency Management. But as we're looking again, whole of state, what about the cities? What about school districts? If they're having an issue, how do they go about that? And then also, do we need to have some sort of different mechanism for not requesting help, but more just notification and things like that? Do we really want, if I'm a city, do I want to notify the county emergency management folks and add another layer of, you know, people handling and dealing with a potentially sensitive incident before it gets to emergency management? Do we have two different contact methods? You know, how do we handle that? You know, so again, definitely some bigger conversations to have around there. So I think that's just kind of, we've identified a problem and now we'll just have to work through it after the fact type thing.
Mhm.
Lots
Okay.
of pieces to the puzzle.
Yes. But it's exciting times, right? Because the coordination and the collaboration, even by virtue of this task force, has been phenomenal. And just learning about the parts and pieces and learning about options and how we can be stronger together here. That's a part that's really excited me about this.
Yes. Great.
So it sounds like for next meeting then, no new guest speakers at this time. It sounds like we will review feedback that's been submitted to us. And then the core focus of next meeting will be really just trying to refine and synthesize and prepare our final set of recommendations in preparation for that final reconciliation full task force meeting.
Good to me.
Yep, sounds good.
All right. Well, I think with that, we'll look at wrapping unless anyone has anything else. Otherwise, thank you for a great subcommittee meeting, and we will see you on the next one.
All right. See you
Good
guys.
weekend, everyone.
Bye.
See you.